Thank
Yes.
you. Good evening. It is 6:30 and the public hearing for temporary ordinance A110 will now come to order. Public hearings are a way to openly and transparently receive facts and opinions about the ordinance, both pro and con. It will be asked 3 times alternately who would like to speak in favor or against of the ordinance. After each question is asked 3 times, the public hearing will be closed, with the ordinance then being discussed in the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting immediately following the public hearing. The subject of tonight's public hearing is temporary ordinance A110, an ordinance presented by the administration approving a zoning map amendment for parcels 35-00402 and 35-00517 at 4344 and 4356 Cuyahoga Lake Road from E1 Employment District to MU3 Suburban Center and declaring an emergency. Who will be speaking or who would like to speak in favor of temporary ordinance A110?
Madam Chair.
Diana, Ms. Colvecchio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I make introductory remarks, I just wanted to introduce the team here is myself and Fred Guerra presenting at this public hearing, as well as Greg Modick is here on behalf of the developer, and I'll leave it to him to introduce the rest of his team. This ordinance that is before you tonight and will be then also read and discussed in the following committee meeting is an ordinance that would change the zoning for these parcels. This is 36.72 acres on Cuyahoga Lake Road. This parcel sits just south of Walsh High School on the west side of Cuyahoga Lake Road. The zoning would be changed from E1 unemployment to MU3 Suburban Center. Last week, I sent all of you via email a criteria from our development code that sets forth the things that you should be thinking about and considering when we ask you to make a map amendment. I also sent you a spreadsheet that details the various zoning and uses for that zoning in our city. I try to send those to you every time we do a map amendment. If I forget, just give me a holler and I'll get those out to you. By way of history, this parcel is owned by the Pelia family, and it has been zoned industrial for decades. It doesn't appear that they have done much until recently to try to market this property and to do something with it. Fred will talk a little bit more about the history with respect to the parcel and some of the things that happened in our city with respect to that with previous charrettes and whatnot. It goes without saying that we don't have an unlimited amount of industrial land in our city. And the original proposal that was brought to Planning Commission for this development included 220 apartments and no industrial or retail space. Planning Commission struck down that proposal. They were bothered by the volume of density, and they were bothered by the fact that this would go from industrial right to residential. Our developer team went to work and they came back with a revised proposal that provides for approximately 160 apartment units and 10 acres of land preserved for future development of a commercial site right on front on the, exactly at the Cuyahoga Lake Road parcel. With that, the Planning Commission felt that that was a good compromise and they approved the map amendment. They did place some restrictions and conditions on their approval, and Fred will speak to those in a moment. And I would hope that you ask questions about those and come back to me if you have any particular concerns with those conditions. And I would remind you that this is just the zoning piece. The applicant developer would have to come back for approval of a preliminary site plan at a later time. But thus far, the plan as conceptually presented would result in a $25.5 million economic impact to our city. It would create 185 construction jobs, resulting in $3.7 million worth of new payroll, and 6 permanent jobs related to the managing of these residential apartments. It also has the potential for the later developed commercial property to bring in an additional 102 jobs once that's built out. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Fred, and I think he'll probably share his screen and talk to you a little bit more about this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Let's share my screen now here. Again, this is a rezoning. This is the first step in the development process. If this is approved, then the developers would come back for preliminary and final subdivision approval and probably site plan approval on the commercial portion of the property. Looking at the site again, you have this with your ordinance is in the front of the property facing Cuyahoga Lake Road. And again, this is just a rendition. This, it's just something for rezoning. We really, these things get flushed out, square footage and units during the subdivision phase when we look at all development aspects. But what they're proposing is at this time 4 office commercial buildings in the southwest corner of the property, and then residential behind it. At the December 15th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, they voted to recommend approval of the zoning map amendment for 4344 to 4346 Cuyahoga Lake Road, subject to the following findings and conditions contained in the files. The Planning Commission found that the proposed map amendments for these parcels from E1 Employment District to MU3 Suburban Center is appropriate with the following stipulations. 1, the commercial office area should be at least 25% or 10 acres of the entire site. This was to make up for potentially loss of jobs that we would get with the rezoning. If you build office buildings, you could have considerable job creation. So there was a minimum amount that they had to develop. 2, residential units shall not exceed 150 units. Again, the final count will be based on the layout and the subdivision process. 3, the Planning Commission went out on the limb saying that, it's important that the commercial development get completed. And so they recommended that the city look at tax increment financing district for the site, in which the TIF funds would be set aside for the development, strictly for the development of the commercial office portion of the site. And 4, the city completes a master redevelopment plan of this section of Cuyahoga Lake Road with the TIF funds. This area in 2005, we changed most of the zoning to E1, which is a flexible employment area, which you can do industrial, you can do commercial, some commercial, you can do office. And nothing really occurred. Prior to that, it was a mixture of residential, office parks, industrial park zoning, and some commercial. And we thought the E1 zoning was best for the site. However, nothing has happened in the last 15 years. And so the idea is that if we're going to go with this rezoning, we would then also create a small master plan to try to encourage development of vacant parcels in this area. And the TIF fund proceeds could be used for the master plan. So those are the 4 stipulations. During the committee report, I can try to answer some of your questions about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Would we have somebody from the developer speak at this point, or should I take opposition comments?
So maybe you should do an opposition, or somebody then go back to the developer next.
Okay, very good. So at this time, I would invite anyone who's opposed to this ordinance to speak. Please note there will be a 3-minute time limit on comments. And in the interest of time, if we have many who would like to speak, please refrain from repeating what has already been asked or said. And at this time, we'd like to invite the first person who would like to speak against temporary ordinance A110. So I think you can put your hand up, Mr. President Brohart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a letter that was sent to City Hall that I've been asked to read. And the letter is from Tom Sullivan of 447 Talmadge Road, Cog Falls. And Mr. Sullivan writes, "To all, how many more times are we going to rezone an area to benefit a developer and thumb your noses at the adjacent property owners who felt the current zoning was protecting them from another high-density housing project? Why did we even go to the trouble to create a long-term plan? If you have the right name, you can just come in and demand it be changed. Will Medina Supply and Structall have to change their process and methods when the complaints start coming in from new residents? Residential developments are a draw on our tax base. Employment zones enhance it. Continue to convert employment zones to residential is not helping our bottom line. By allowing this, you are setting a dangerous precedent. Show someone does not have the right people wrapped around their little finger. Vote against this change of zoning. Tom Sullivan." Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, President Brohart. Is there someone from the developer or Mr. Guerra like to respond to that comment and those questions?
I guess I can respond. Yeah, the reason why this took so long to get to us, this sat in the department for review. The Planning Commission turned down the first rezoning, and the goal was to try to create a sort of win-win situation that we can get some job creation and some housing on the site, and that's why it changed from E1 rezoning to R5 rezoning, which is residential, to MU3, which is nearby. And then the Planning Commission also put the other caveats to this, that this commercial area, or I shouldn't say commercial because it's probably not an office area, would be built with some tax incentives based on the investment. And so we took a long time and looked at these issues, and this was what the Planning Commission approved or recommended, that it would be this MU3 / residential area with office.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to open it up to anyone who would like to speak in favor of the ordinance. Yes, Mr. Modick.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. Greg Modick, 10474 Broadview Road, Broadview Heights, Ohio. We're the developer and applicant for this project, and I'll try to make this very, very brief here, but I just want everyone to understand there is a very long history associated with this application. I believe the first application came in approximately a year or more ago. Certainly I remember that because it was pre-COVID and things were a lot different, as we all could have sat in person on that. In fact, even so much so, I remember our first layout was single family residential that we were originally bringing in. Detached units, kind of looked at the market, felt that was a good fit and feel for it. I do want to make one point of clarification as we were asked to do so. When it was first submitted, our engineer actually came up with the name on our application of Walsh Highlands. And it was because that engineering firm had done survey work, myself personally, when I was there for Walsh. And we kind of joked that we're on the highland above it, and hence the name. Walsh has no affiliation. Walsh Jesuit has no affiliation with this project whatsoever. Our application name, and should we move forward, would come in underneath Princeton Crossroads Investments, not Walsh. So just wanted to say that. So when we came in, we did meet opposition associated with the single family or residential as a whole. When COVID hit, we did take a step back. We actually spent a significant amount of time, money, and resources collaborating with Jobs Ohio, looking to make this a pure industrial development. And we could not move that forward. They ranked that as not being very high of a location. We just couldn't find an opportunity to make it work there. The analysis I'll take from when we submitted the 200 some units to Planning Commission was I constantly heard that, they liked the idea, they liked the concept, it didn't just quite fit right. I believe Mr. Rice used the terminology of the square peg in the round hole, which certainly I felt like we were doing. We had taken that additional step back and provided the mixed use layout that we put in front of Planning Commission and received unanimous approval that is now in front of council here this evening. And I think it was a great opportunity to create the mechanism that will allow jobs to be created here on the office and commercial and industrial portion on the front there. The back portion, I think the financial analysis that was provided to the city will show that, it is not a drain on the city. We'll have private roads. We'll take care of the road street plowing, maintenance, replacement repairs, trash pickup as well. And we will have on-site managers for that property in order to field the calls from the residents. We will be responsible for the maintenance of the buildings as well as the grounds on the property as well there. So I just wanted to point out a little bit of that history associated with how we kind of got to where we're at. It's well over a year in the making. It was done at a lengthy collaboration with the Planning Commission and the administration, always being open to feedback and working with them. And the last thing I want to leave with is, and as I know it's always a very important topic in Cuyahoga Falls, but specific to this tributary of Mud Brook, it's stormwater management. As the property sits here today as an active construction yard, there's asphalt scattered across the entire property almost. That rainwater hits it and just runs right off. And it's been like that probably 25, 30 years from what I can tell on Google Earth. And during that time, there's never been any stormwater management of that runoff. As we look to embark on engineering, if we are able to obtain rezoning with this, certainly we'll work with Mr. Damasi in the city and not evaluate it as the current state and what we're changing it to, but what was it previously and now what are we doing? But what I'll state is that with the plan and the green space we have presented here, we're actually going to be creating more green space than is currently on that property here today, which is kind of a unique thing. And I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. So should there be any questions of the committee, of all of council, or anything I can answer from a resident comment or anyone else, I'd be glad to do so. Thank you so much for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you. I will now ask if there's anyone who would like to speak against the ordinance. Mr. Stamms, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinner. I don't know whether this is for or against, but I know in Mr. Sullivan's letter that Mr. Brillhart read, he brought up an interesting point, and I just wanted to know how I don't know, Mr. Guerra feels about it, or anybody from, city leadership. He mentioned, is it what, Mr. Brillhart, without having you read the entire letter again, he mentioned something about the balance between residents and maybe corporate growth or industrial growth, and I thought that was interesting. Do you know where that was in the letter? And if you could read that again so that I do him justice in his letter, I'd really appreciate that.
How about if we do this? Why don't we somehow get that letter sent to everybody tomorrow so you can actually read it?
That'd be wonderful. But so on that notion, Mr. Guerra, is the city, how do you feel about that? I think you heard the comments there from Mr. Sullivan. Is the growth, are we sacrificing too much residential growth for maybe say industrial growth? I think that's what he was talking about.
Well, I mean, anytime you rezone a property from an E1, which is our industrial district, to another district, residential is a good example, is that yes, you're not, that land will never be developed industrial. It will never create jobs. And so the goal with the planning commission is we didn't want to do that. If there was a rezoning, we wanted a job component. And so that's the reason for 50,000 square feet or 25% or 10 acres for office space, is to have some job growth potential. E1 is a very, very unique district. It allows for office, it allows for light industrial, it allows for limited retail. So the goal is to create jobs. So our goal was, if this is going to get rezoned, there had to be a job component, and that's why we required that the front of the property be made available for job growth. So, but the first statement was, yeah, when you rezone something, if you rezone it to something that doesn't have a potential for creating jobs, then you lose that potential forever.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mrs. Spinner.
Thank you, Mr. Stamps.
Ms.
Yes, Ms. Colvecchio.
I apologize for the interruption. Before we get too far afield here with a sort of a question and answer dialogue back and forth, I would just want to remind council that the nature of a public hearing is to just hear comments. And when we adjourn from the public hearing and go into the committee meeting, we can have this exchange back and forth of question and answer. And we want to answer all the questions. Our developers will still be with us for that part of tonight's presentation as well.
Thank you very much. I would now ask once again for any comments for the ordinance. And you see any hands up, Ms. Colvecchio?
I think Mr. Karam had his hand up.
Very good.
Yes, thank you. I just like to probably address real quick, Councilman Stams. We just went through this exercise last year across the street and changed the zoning to MU3 for the particular reason that we're doing this one. I've been working on that intersection since 20 years ago now. I invested on that intersection 20 years ago with the same pretenses, looking for E1 and to advance the city in the commercial format. So 20 years later, there's still the same area, looks the same as it did when I did that project on the corner there with Wing Warehouse, et cetera. I've also put in almost a half a mile of sanitary line for the requirements to go east on Steele's Corners that still hasn't been tapped into. So when we talk about E1 and we talk about commercial, when we talk about Team NEO, who studied the project, who we tried to work with the state, and they turned it down because it's not feasible, and it's across from all the multifamily that's right there. We came up with the idea of doing all 200 plus apartments, and we compromised by putting almost 50 or 60,000 square feet of commercial with the city. So as it relates to the area being set up as a commercial spot only, we've seen now, and I've seen over the past 20 years and 50 years, this land's been sitting there. That's not a feasible spot for it. That's why we did a compromise, both with residential as well with some commercial area there, as Fred went through on his presentation. So we compromised, and we're trying to accomplish both by a job creation as well as residential.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think this would be the third time to ask again if there's anybody who has comments that oppose the ordinance. Looking to see if there are any hands up. Okay. Thank you, everyone who spoke this evening. At this time, the planning and zoning public hearing is now over. It is now 6:55 and the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting will come to order. First, we have minutes to approve from the January 4th, 2021 committee meeting. Are there any additions, subtractions, or deletions? Hearing none, they will stand as written. Next, we have two ordinances to consider this evening. First, temporary ordinance A110. An ordinance presented by the administration approving a zoning map amendment for parcels 35-00402 and 35-00517 at 4344 and 4356 Cuyahoga Lake Road from E1 Employment District to MU3 Suburban Center and declaring an emergency. Ms. Colvecchio, could you start us off, please?
Yes, thank you again. Thank you for your patience, everyone. One of the things that was mentioned in the conditions that were handed down by the Planning Commission related to a TIF, and I need to speak to that. And as a refresher course, a TIF is a tax incremental financing. It is an economic development tool in our arsenal that we use to help launch projects. We grant the development team a tax abatement of sorts, but instead of the county keeping all that money, we get it sent to us in the way of pilot payments, and then we earmark those funds for project improvements at the site that's being developed. But one of the things that the Planning Commission thought that we should do with the TIF money was that we should use those funds to actually build out the commercial buildings that are being projected for this 10 acres of this site. And I want the rest of council to know that while we have had some internal conversations and we have had some preliminary discussions with our bond counsel, we're doing research on this whole notion of doing a TIF, and we are not at all prepared to say tonight definitively that we're going to do a TIF. And one of the biggest reasons why we can't say that definitively tonight is that we see, and this was number 4 in the Planning Commission's recommendations, is that there's a greater need perhaps for the TIF funds, if we do a TIF, to be earmarked and used for improving traffic flow in this corridor. And let me expand on the definition of corridor for a moment. In the next ordinance that your committee is going to read, Ms. Spinner, we are going to discuss a preliminary site plan for Pine Ridge. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but that new development that's being proposed this evening is at the other end of State Road, just north of Hidden Lakes development. And I know that there are residents on this call right now that are listening in and wanting to know what we're going to do about traffic flow issues for them in their corridor. So let me just say that is part and parcel of our conversations internally and with bond counsel about a TIF. We are discussing this entire area as one big corridor, from State Road to Steele's Corners to Cuyahoga Lake Road to Seasons Road. And we are working with the development team here under the guidance of Mr. Petros and Greg Modick, and who have been very accommodating actually in providing us with additional details about the costs of doing a traffic corridor study. And we want to continue those conversations with them because we believe that we can't put the cart before the horse. We cannot say we're going to do a TIF until we do a traffic corridor study for this entire area and make some definite conclusions about what that traffic flow currently is, and whether there are issues and problems with it. Our residents say there are. We need to confirm that with a study and go from there. So we are not making promises, but we are definitely in the listening pattern and zone. We want to know for sure, and we're not experts. So we're going to continue those conversations. And we would be back to you at council at some point with a decision on performing this corridor traffic study, the results of a traffic corridor study, and then whether that, in our opinion, also now warrants the full-blown TIF that we would maybe do for this development. So I wanted to explain that. If you have any specific questions about that, please feel free to ask me. But there's a lot to that, and we cannot commit to that this evening. And then Fred, I didn't know if you had any additional comments other than what you've made on this one.
I don't. I can try to answer any questions for anyone, but I don't have any additional comments.
Thank you for all who have presented on this ordinance, and we have discussed it quite extensively, and I know there are probably some more questions. I just want to comment based on what you were just saying, Ms. Colvecchio, how encouraging it is to know that, you know, in anticipation of residents' concerns and issues, that traffic is definitely on the table for something to be considered, and you know, taking that to heart and possibly correcting any issues along that entire corridor that may be presented with the new development. Having said that, I want to open it up to questions from the committee.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a matter of a point of clarification in the written ordinance itself on lines 2 and lines 19. It brings out the addresses as 4344 and 4356 Cuyahoga Lake Road. And in the Planning Commission's report, it said 4344 and 4346. And I was just wanting to get that cleared up on which are the correct addresses.
Mr.
Anybody?
Guerrero.
I believe the Planning Commission is the correct address. However, those parcel numbers are the true identification, because there's 2 parcels. So probably the parcel numbers are more important than the addresses, but we should correct that address in the ordinance.
Yeah, we'll verify those and get a substitute down for next week if necessary. Sounds like it is necessary.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. James. Anybody else from the committee have a question, comments?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, may I address this to Mrs. Colvecchio?
Yes.
Mrs. Colvecchio, I just had a question regarding the TIF. I know it's a zoning map amendment, but is this project dependent on a TIF?
It is not. The project before you for a zoning map amendment, it hinges only on your review of the criteria set in the development code. That criteria I sent you from a chapter 1113, I believe it was. So that's your criteria for review. Nothing else.
So the Planning Commission was basically just a recommendation for us to consider.
Correct.
And then just a question regarding Mr. Modak had mentioned the private roads. I guess the question is, what would be the city's investment into that as far as the infrastructure with those private roads?
I'm going to let Mr. Modak has his hand up. I'm going to let him respond to that, I think, in part. And then I don't know, Fred, you have something additional to say there.
With regards to the roads being private, because it's going to be owned by one entity, which is our group, and then rented out, we're making them private. So we would pay for all that infrastructure, and we would pay to then maintain, not only install, but maintain it. And I want to make it clear too, the idea of the TIF, the TIF is not depending on us doing the portion in the back. I think it was a collaborative effort, an idea that came up through Planning Commission. I'm not speaking for them, but just kind of my take on it. They looked at it and looked at the opportunity and heard what some of the residents were saying, not only on that, but the other item on the agenda that was going through similar processes at the time, and just thought, hey, here's an opportunity to try and address some of those concerns and some funding that can create it and help then possibly create some jobs in the front too. So the residential component is not dependent on the TIF, and we would pay for the infrastructure associated with it and then maintain it.
And then just one final question, if I may, Madam Chair. This is in the this would be in the Woodridge School District. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Those are the
Thank you, Mr. Miller. At this time, I'd like to open it up to the council at large, or the rail. Mr. Stams, you have your hand up. Would you like to make a comment
Yes,
or ask a
thank you,
question?
Mrs. Spinner. I just want to really kind of echo what you said to Mrs. Calavecchio and applaud her and congratulate her for what I think is a responsible approach to, or with the proposed TIF and having the best interest of, you know, the people in the community and regarding the traffic flow out front. I think that's wonderful. That's all I want to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Nichols Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment that while it is true that we would like some industrial and job creation, that's always great, but having more residents has a couple of positive effects as well. One is that they are the people who will buy and spend in whatever entities, businesses we have here in Cuyahoga Falls. Also, I believe it's good for the school district to have more students. If I'm incorrect, Dr. Nichols is on here, maybe he could correct me. And I just think also it helps for us, we're eligible for CDBG money because of our population. And so we do always want to have more people living here. So I just wanted to counter that a little bit. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols Rhodes. Any other comments or questions from council? Like it to open it up to comments or questions from the public in attendance tonight. Looking to see if there are any hands up. Yes, is it Mr. Marvin, or is that your first name? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Marvin Montgomery. I'm at 5 Hidden Lake Lane.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear Ms. Calvicchio talk about the traffic, and hopefully it's not just a possibility, but hopefully a study is going to be done to look at that whole corridor for two specific areas. Definitely a light there at Hidden Lake Lane, and where all those three roads come together, State Road. And also taking a look at the speed limit, you know, because the speed limit at one point jumps up to 45, which means people are going 55 and 60 coming up to that area. So I'm really hoping and praying that we don't get new developments again in this area without taking in consideration the traffic patterns that are already there. Last week, another accident was right out front. You know, I'm the second house in when you pull into 5 Hidden Lake Lane, and another accident out front of Hidden Lake Lane and State Road, 3 cars. So, and I'd say we got either a near miss or an accident every month there. You know, some are reported, some aren't. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm hoping that we're just not talking about it, because sometimes we do talk about things. We all have good intentions, but it'd be great if we can take some of these intentions and execute them with some action, especially when it comes to the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Are there any other?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
The letter that Mr. Brillhart read, Mr. Sullivan had referenced some resident complaints. I haven't received any resident complaints on this specific project personally, but if any council members have, I would appreciate if you could forward those to me if they were sent via email. That'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yes, President Brillhart.
I just would like to make a couple comments. Number one, that is my ward over there, and I have not heard any complaints from any of the residents over there about anything regarding this project or traffic issues or any future development or the two businesses. The other thing I guess I would be remiss if I didn't make a comment. Water issues are kind of a big thing in Ward 5, and the administration has really done a wonderful job of trying to identify these issues and the remediation of them. And I very much appreciate Mr. Modic's comments, because if you see that property now, it is kind of a mess, and it is almost 100% runoff right now. And you know, it's kind of ironic that a project would actually improve the water runoff. But I firmly believe what Mr. Modic is saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brillhart. Ms. Capriulo or Ms. Ziatola, were there any other comments or letters regarding this ordinance?
Only the letter that Mr. Brillhart read, but I do see another hand up.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't see it. Who is it? I'm so sorry.
Baron Pfizer.
Oh, yes. Mr. Pfizer, can you please state your name and address? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. My name is Baron Fileser. I live at 5035 Little Brook Drive in the Hidden Lakes community. I just wanted to ask, so for the potential traffic study, do you know, will that take COVID into consideration? I guess I'm thinking that right now with schools going virtual and stuff like that, this might not be the best time to make a case for some of the congestion that we're seeing trying to exit the community at specific times of day.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Modic.
I'm sure I saw Mr. Damasi's hand pop up too.
Sorry.
Yes, there actually are counts. It's an additive factor associated with COVID that's published across the state, and there are ones specific to Summit County. In addition, we have engaged Eric Smith with Prime AE, who's done a significant amount of studies up and down this Route 8 corridor and some of the interchanges with Route 8. So he has some historic counts as well to check against. And I know the city and Mr. Damasi has some information as well that he's working with them to gather. So between some of the historic pre-COVID stuff as well as the COVID factors, I'm confident that there will be an accurate representation of what that traffic is out there. And then also taking into account the accident reports out there.
Very good. Thank you for your question. Mr. Damasi, did you want to add anything?
No, I was going to mention the COVID correction factors that ODOT publishes, and those are the ones that we use currently.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Mr. Stamps?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Spinner. On the study that Mr. Pfizer talked about, is this, I was under the impression the city is doing a study as well as the developer. Is that the case? Am I wrong?
Ms. Colvecchio?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I see Greg Modic has his hand up too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The estimate for the study has been presented to the city by the developer, and we are going to talk about sharing that expense exactly. So what we're doing next, though, is having the person that Mr. Modic gave us the estimate from, talk to Tony, our engineer, about how we can maybe reduce some of those costs, do some of those things internally, etc. So it's in the preliminary stages of negotiating how much we will participate in it.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Modic.
Yeah, I just wanted to leave with that, in that we engaged for a very preliminary study based specific to just our subdivisions with this traffic engineer, and then we heard the need for additional studies. We did ask him for a proposal associated with that entire area and corridor, but then hearing Mr. Damasi speak over the course of some prior meetings, understood there's a lot of data that's already out there. So we asked him to refine that cost, and we're committed to working with the city on this. I don't look at it as necessarily this is our study, but it's our study we're going to help participate in and work with the city. Certainly Mr. Smith at Prime AE would work directly with Mr. Damasi associated with the exact scope and then the final findings and recommendations of it there.
Thank you. I think we have another question from Lori Ross. You could state your name and your address, please. And you're muted, so. Oh. You're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Lori Ross, 5047 Lake Forest in Hidden Lakes. I guess my question is with the traffic study that may potentially happen. I mean, I've been on several of these meetings and I know you've had previous studies, like the other gentleman had said, this is cyclical based on school starting time. So I think a lot of times when the study's done, at the end of the day, they determine that nothing needs to be changed because it's a small window of time. But I'm wondering if there would be considerations to make minor modifications that might help. As Marvin suggested, speed limit. I know for our example, our stop sign is set back very close. So you have to go past the stop sign in order to get clearance. So that indicates, at least that's what the police officer told me when my son was involved in the accident, that people in our development and then the proposed development will always be cited. So even if the people going north and south on State Road are speeding or going outside of the traffic lane, because we are past the stop sign, again, if there's no other witnesses, we will always be cited. And again, I don't know anything about traffic. I don't know if that can be changed, but even those small things that might help visibility or, you know, because my fear is that they're going to do a traffic study and say it's only busy for these, you know, peak times. So we don't need to put a major investment into changing this. So I'm just wondering if that's part of that traffic study and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to answer that? Mr. Modick.
Yeah, typically the traffic studies will take into account, you know, the peak flow traffic, the school traffic, the all day traffic, the weekend traffic. They'll run all those counts to understand them. And then I think it would look at, and that can be added to the portion of the scope there to make sure that they're looking at not just, hey, does it warrant a signal? Should we put in a signal? And what is that? Or anything else that may come in out there, but maybe in some of the smaller details too, to see if there is something that could address that out there. So I think in giving the consultant that direction in the onset, which certainly we can do, I think it's the best way to capture it and make sure that those opportunities are explored.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, Mr. Balthus.
Thank you, Chair Spenner. One comment I would just like to make. I do applaud the idea of thinking about doing the TIF because, you know, one thing about studies that's really good is sometimes you can figure out solutions, but then they usually have a cost tag or a price tag associated with them. And so I like the idea of, you know, considering the tax increment financing to be directed towards that, because then not only do you have a study that can identify what maybe some of the corrections could be, but you also have a funding source to try to then start implementing those changes and make the corrections. So I think that's, I just want to say from what I'm hearing, I think that's a great way to think about it. And I think that's wise. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Balthus. Are there any other comments or questions? Does anybody see anybody's hands up that I'm missing? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and entertain a motion to bring temporary ordinance A110 out of committee for a vote next week.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
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 Yes, motion passes 3-0. The next item we have this evening is temporary ordinance B1 as presented by the administration, authorizing and approving the preliminary subdivision plat for the ledges at Pine Ridge on parcel 37-001 00221 at 5008 State Road and declaring an emergency. Ms. Kulvicchio, would you please lead us?
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. And it was very convenient that these two ordinances were put in the package together, since some of the same players and partners are all here on the same Zoom call with us tonight. So again, by way of introduction, I will make some just some preliminary remarks, and I'll turn this over to Fred. I'm sure he'll be sharing his screen on this ordinance. And the same development team is here with us tonight on this one. This development was a project that was previously known as Thompson Villas. And this is the preliminary site plan that is located just north of Hidden Lakes on State Road. This parcel was before you already for a map amendment to change the zoning on these 12.33 acres. And you approved that previously. The zoning was changed from MU1 Rural Neighborhood Center to R5 Mixed Density Residential. Tonight, the applicant is back for approval of the preliminary site plan, and a map was included in your packet for that. If approved, this development will consist of 49 owner-occupied townhomes with a total investment value of $6.5 million for our city, and create 47 construction jobs that would bring in new payroll of $2.6 million. So with that, I will turn it over to Fred. And we can have more discussion if you'd like about the traffic and the corridor study, but all of that we said just on the prior ordinance applies to this as well, because as we go forward, we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in this area, and we'll know more once that traffic study is completed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Fred.
All right, thank you, Diana. I'll share my screen with everyone. I'm going to get to the right slide here. Whoops, I'm too fast. All right, again, this is a preliminary subdivision plat. This is the first phase of the subdivision process, and the final phase is a final subdivision, and after final subdivision, development could occur. The plat on the left shows those parcels, cul-de-sac street, coming off of Akron-Cleveland Road or State Road. And then on the right, it just shows how the townhomes will be placed on those parcels. At the January 5th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting, they found that project PMP-20-00054 met the Cuyahoga Falls General Development Code preliminary subdivision plat approval and recommended approval of the Ledges of Pine Ridge preliminary subdivision plat with the following stipulations that shall be incorporated in the final subdivision plat. First item is the proposed street name of Ledges Lane must be changed. We felt it was too close to Legend Lanes, the bowling alley. And besides, the code calls for east-west streets to be designated as avenues, not lanes. Second item is the proposed street shall be public and meet the L-50R local rural street type standards. Also, the proposed sidewalks shall be 5 feet wide or take the form of a 7 to 8 foot multi-purpose trail. 3, the proposed driveways do not meet the 40-foot separation requirements. However, allowances have been made to other townhome subdivisions. Therefore, proposed driveways shall be allowed even if they do not meet the 40-foot separation requirements. 4, a trail sidewalk on State Road shall be constructed and connected to the sidewalks on Hidden Lake lanes. 5, heavy landscape buffering as defined in table 1145-26 and section 1145.08 shall be located along State Road and between the detention basin and the Hidden Lakes neighborhood. 6, a subdivision must meet all other Title II land division requirements. 7, the subdivision must meet all Chapter 1142 residential neighborhood design standards. 8, the subdivision must meet all Chapter 1145 landscape design requirements, including street trees and tree preservation and protection. And then finally, that's not a code issue, but it's an off-site issue. It is a code, but it's not a subdivision so much a subdivision. It's an off-site issue. The developer shall work with the city to implement a complete state road corridor traffic study. And that completes the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone from the developer that would like to speak to this ordinance? Yes, Mr. Modik.
You guys got me again. So we're really excited for this project. I think it's going to be a great addition to the area. Certainly the traffic is important. I'm glad these two are coming together. So we're not just looking at one or the other, but the traffic as a whole, so we can really make the right recommendations as to what's supposed to happen there. The sidewalk along State Road, we had it shown on our preliminary plan during the Planning Commission meeting. Residents spoke to, hey, sometimes as the traffic goes around there, they might get a little close. So sidewalks, I've directed our engineers to, be aware of that, to plan for that, do some additional survey work if needed, and certainly work with the traffic engineer with regards to recommendations and any improvements that may be needed out there. The landscaping stuff, we plan on bringing together a very nice landscaping plan to ensure that we have the proper screenage against the neighbors to the west as well as the south there, where we're getting a little bit closer, and save as many of the trees that are currently there as possible and supplement with an additional as needed. Once our plan's done and we go out there and we build, if we need to add more, we certainly will. We want to make sure that's a nice screening against those neighbors there, and we will accomplish that. If there's any questions that you may have, either from questions of the committee, all of council, or the residents, I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you again for your time on this application tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Modik. I just want to say I'm excited about, sidewalks being on State Road, because sometimes you see developments, kind of becoming like an island and not having pedestrian access to the outside of their neighborhood. So that was an interesting addition, in my opinion. I'd like to open it up to questions from the committee. Mr. Stams, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Is it okay? I'm not on the committee. I didn't hear what you said, but you were smiling while you said it, so I'm going to say, okay.
Thumbs up. Yeah, I didn't see any other questions or hands up from the committee, so I was going to go ahead.
I just wanted to maybe take a look at the map again. Technology and my lack of expertise. Just wanted to be clear on the entrance and the exit. Are they coming, this new development, are they coming in to the from the development from State Road, or are they accessing it through Hidden Lakes, or I'm not sure. Maybe it's me. I can't hear anybody now.
I'm trying to
off a State Road.
Oh.
I'm trying to get to it here. Yeah, everything's off State Road.
Everything's off State Road. Okay, and it just there's just I would imagine just one entrance in and out. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stams. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee or council? Mr. Brohart.
Madam Chairman, if I may ask, what school district is this in?
Hudson.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Before we move on, I just wanted to speak to the traffic, and I don't know how many people have seen that in the mornings when both schools are in session. They start at the same time. We tried to get them to stagger. They could not due to busing issues. It is a nightmare. And I sat numerous mornings, and I think Frank Stams, Russ probably has. You really have to see this because it's total gridlock. And even if there's not a permanent fix, there has to be something that we can do in those peak hours. Now, Blossom Music Center, that's a whole nother issue once they start up again, but something we can do in the mornings The study will address that. The study will look at those numbers. And I know that there's changes that we can make, because to turn left out of Hidden Lakes at that time of morning is nearly impossible. So if you sit there and you watch, you'll see what we're talking about. Thank you. We'll get some answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is Mrs. Judah. You're on mute. There you go.
I was wondering how far north of the Hidden Lakes entrance, the entrance to this other development would be.
Mr. Guerra or Mr. Modic?
I have to get to my maps, which is a little bit harder typically, but if I can try to share the screen here. I was unsuccessful a few minutes ago. I don't know why, but
It is approximately 350 feet, Fred. I was just measuring that too.
all right.
I printed a drawing not to scale, so my scale didn't work, so I had to go to Google.
Awesome, thank you. Mrs. Judah, I'm sorry, if you could unmute yourself and give us your full name and address for the minutes, please.
Sorry, so sorry. Lucille Judah. I live in Hidden Lakes at 142 Park View Court.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions from the community that's in attendance? Is there any correspondence related to this ordinance? Ms. Ciatola or Ms. Capriulo?
Not that
No.
I've received.
Okay. I don't want to miss anybody. Okay. Well, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on this ordinance. I'd like to motion that we take it out of committee and bring it up for a vote at next week's council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, and the motion passes 3-0. Thank you, everyone, and that concludes the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting.
Thank you. It's 7:30. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Before I do that, I saw Ms. LaRouge pop up on the chat and wanted to see the map again. Ms. LaRouge, if you're still on the call tonight, if you want to give your address or email or telephone number, someone from the city can get that map to you, whatever the easiest communication method is for you. Okay. We have 3 items to discuss this evening in the Finance Committee. We have B2, B3, and B4. Prior to beginning the discussion on those, we also have 3 sets of minutes. I would like to approve them tonight, but they got sent out, one of them like this afternoon. So does anybody on council need additional time to review the minutes before I make a motion to approve? That'd be from the Budget Committee, November 23, 12/7, and 12/21. Okay. I would like to approve the minutes from November 23rd, 12/7, and 12/21. Are there any corrections, deletions, or remarks about those minutes? Hearing none, we'll approve those minutes as written. We're still getting some chats here. Okay, we're all set with that. Okay, so temporary ordinance B2 presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts according to law for the demolition of structures located on 121 May Avenue within the city and removal of demolition debris, and certifying the cost thereof to the county fiscal officer for collection in the manner provided by law and declaring an emergency. In communication with Mr. Damasi, some background on this property, March 24th of last year, 2020, Our people went out, met with the property owner regarding a citizen complaint regarding hoarding and non-functioning plumbing. The interior and exterior were inspected. The dwelling was posted as unfit for human habitation. Some of the reasons were the hoarding, obstructed egress, some combustibles, fire load, and non-functioning plumbing. 30-day order for the interior and a 75-day order for the exterior were issued. The city followed up with the family on many occasions during that time. They have been unsuccessful in selling the property as is, as I guess you can imagine, and there is a remaining mortgage balance. Summit County then issued a condemnation order on November 17th. There was no response provided by the family within the 30 days to the county. We've been told that the family plans to file for bankruptcy and walk away. I don't know if there's anything additional, Tony. That's everything that you had communicated to me.
No, that's, I don't have anything further to add other than throughout this whole process, we'll continue to work with the family, or I should say housing will continue to work with the family up until the point that we are ready to demolish. So if anything changes, we'll certainly do that. But this ordinance gives us the authorization to move forward with the demolition.
Okay, they are still in there then?
No, I don't think anybody's in the home right now.
Okay. Well, I think I make the same comment anytime something like this comes up, and probably we all share this. It's a shame when a house becomes in this condition. You feel badly for the family involved. It sounds like these folks tried to do the right thing and try to take care of it, and just evidently don't have the means to do so. At the same time, it's not pleasant at all to live next to a house that comes in this state, and it's our responsibility, as well as the county's responsibility, to move in and take care of this in the best way we can for all parties. But the neighborhood doesn't deserve to have a house in this condition next to their properties either. So I know, Tony, that you and your team are definitely empathetic and work with these people on that level, and we appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Any questions or comments from the rail? We do still have some folks from the public on the call, so are there any comments that anyone from the public would like to make? And I'm gonna take a minute, same as Ms. Spinner did, to navigate this, make sure I don't have anybody in the chat or their hands up. I don't see anybody. So with that, is there a motion to bring out temporary ordinance B2 for a vote next week? I'll make a motion. Would anybody like to second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ayala. We have a motion and a second to vote on temporary ordinance B2. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Let's move to temporary ordinance B3, presented by the administration upon recommendation of the Park and Recreation Board. An ordinance authorizing the Parks and Recreation Board to enter into a contract or contracts according to law for repairs to the pavilion located at 2085 Front Street and declaring an emergency. Most of you will probably recall this was discussed during budget time, and it is budgeted for this repair. But to give us a refresher on this, Ms. Klein is on the call. Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Hi, sure. Thank you, Mr. Gorbach. Thank you, everyone. These repairs are necessary for the external stairs at the Pavilion building. Many of you who are in City Council joined us last January when Mr. Fallis and I took you on a tour of our facilities. And I think several of you noted at the time that the Pavilion stairs needed attention. So this is to address that. There is a small amount of work that will be directed towards the soffits and the supporting structures around the steps. But the majority of it is for the steps, and we think it'll really enhance the building and make it much safer and really spruce that building up. It is time for this.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the Finance Committee? From the rail? from the public? Okay, I don't see or hear anything. With that, is there a motion to bring out temporary ordinance B4 for a vote next week?
So moved.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second to bring out temporary ordinance B4. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Wait a minute, did I say B4 or B3? Or were we
It should
on?
be B3.
Yeah, B3. Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second to pass B3. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We'll move to temporary ordinance B4, presented by the administration upon recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Board. An ordinance authorizing the Parks and Recreation Board to enter into contract or contracts according to law for the Waterworks Family Aquatic Center roof replacement project and declaring an emergency. My comments are identical to the previous ordinance. Ms. Klein, can you brief us on this as well?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Gorbach. This is exactly as it says, a roof replacement project for the structures at Waterworks Family Aquatic Center. They are in significant need of replacement. And as you might imagine, we want to keep things as well maintained as we possibly can at the Aquatic Center. It's one of our significant facilities, and we feel that this will go a long way into helping preserve the structures that we have there.
I agree. Are there any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? From the rail? And again, from the public? Okay. Is there a motion to bring out temporary ordinance B4 for a vote next week?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, sorry.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to bring out temporary ordinance B4 for a vote next week. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our report for this evening.
Thank you.
Okay. It's now 7:42 and the Public and Industrial Improvements Committee will come to order. First, we have some minutes to approve from January 4th, 2021. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, they will stand as written. Tonight, we are going to discuss temporary substitute ordinance B5, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts according to law for the annual resurfacing and/or repair of various streets as described in Exhibit A, attached hereto in the City of Cuyahoga Falls, and authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts for pavement preservation on various streets within the city and declaring an emergency. Mr. DeMasi, if you wouldn't mind talking about this ordinance, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly. This is our annual ordinance allowing the city to resurface various streets as needed. We will again be utilizing a combination of methods to pave our roads, including the hot mix, which is the majority of it, and also chip sealing. We plan on beginning the bidding of the project on March 14th and open the bids on March 30th of this year. The ODOT asphalt placing index, which is what we look at to predict asphalt prices, has continued to drop from its high in July of 2019. It's now at the lowest it's been since May 2018. And so as a result, we're hopeful we're getting that we'll get some good pricing. In fact, as we're getting some anecdotal evidence from surrounding communities that the prices are going to be good this year. The streets we propose to pave are as listed in the exhibit. This list was prepared by my office in consultation with the street department and is based on the ratings of our streets, which were prepared by Pavement Management Group in 2020 last year. The ratings are based on several criteria, including pavement conditions and the roadway type or the volume of the traffic. This program is always very competitive, and so we hope for good competitive pricing again, as I stated. As you mentioned, we do have a substitute ordinance that we are submitting, and it's being submitted for several reasons. Let me just go through those. First, we're asking to remove from the original exhibit the Cuyahoga Falls Industrial Parkway. This is to allow the street department to use some new equipment on this road and resurface it for us. This will help buy us a few years, a couple years at least, maybe few on this road. And if it's successful as this test, then it's something we want them to do more often, so that instead of having to, resurface this road this year, maybe we can do it in a few years instead. In addition, we want to add the streets in the Brook Point development off Bath Road. These streets have experienced some accelerated deterioration this winter, and we want to resurface these now instead of when they're scheduled in a couple years from now, because if not, we'll probably lose the streets and have to rebuild them instead. So we think now's an opportune time, a must time, to go ahead and resurface those at this time. In addition, we want to add Ninth Court to the chip seal program. It's a very small public road. It's a small court off of Portage Trail. And also we will be adding, you'll probably noticed it's in the preamble and also in one of the sections, adding a section to allow us to contract for preventative maintenance work. Now, this is work that we've already budgeted. We had it programmed in our budget this year to do preventative maintenance. And so what is preventative maintenance? Well, that is processes that we can do to roads that are recently paved. And I say recently, anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 years after they've been paved, that will lengthen the time that we need to come back and resurface them roads again. And so some of the technologies that are out there are terms like rejuvenation, it's called. That's a process where they basically put down some liquid emulsion, asphalt emulsion on the top of the pavement. That product penetrates down through the asphalt and helps bind that surface course together and prevents that initial cracking from beginning. Crack sealing, cape sealing, micro surfacing, there's a whole litany of opportunities for us to do that. And so by including that language in the ordinance, it allows us to go ahead and do that work. It doesn't, again, we already had that program and budget for this year. Highlights of our program this year, we'll be paving Main Street from Howe to Newberry. This is a major road for us, and we've been waiting until the Howe Avenue project was complete. Now that project is complete, we want to go ahead and jump on this and get that moving forward. We're going to continue to use fibers in the asphalt mix. That seems to hold that surface layer together very well and prevents that initial cracking. And again, as I mentioned, we'll be using chip seal as an alternative, as an economic alternative to our hot mix program. And so with that, I'm here to entertain any questions anybody might have.
Thank you, Mr. Demasi. I had asked because it seemed like the chip and seal list was longer this year, which is because it's been used and it's been successful, and it does cost a little less. Mr. Demasi shared with me that chip and seal can cost $3 to $10 a square yard, depending on the method used, compared to asphalt being $13 to $15 a square yard. So you can see how we can just get more. In fact, this year he said about 10% more lane miles, excuse me, are going to be able to be resurfaced because we have a $3 million budget this year. So one of the things that I was impressed by too is looking at the, each of the streets or segments of streets are rated with a composite score, and they go anywhere from failed to excellent. And because we've had this increased budget to repave our roads, we're getting more being rated good, very good, and excellent. It's because they've recently been paved. So I think it's really a testament to how successful it is to add to our budget to repave our roads. I think that's all I have. Is there anyone from the committee who has any questions or comments? Mr. Ayula.
Thanks, Mary. Because I've been on the public improvements for quite a while, I usually go and I drive every one of these roads. And I did last Thursday. It took about 3.5 hours. but it was okay. I had a little buddy with me, and he'd write down, and we'd kind of grade them. We tried to do it by wards and all, and each time I try to grade if I really think that it's really, you know, bad F or D or C or whatever, and it was, you know, it was similar. It seemed like that this year we're doing a lot of the little cul-de-sacs and all. And that's great because they probably haven't been done in 20 years or so. Maybe they didn't need them. For one thing, on Thursday night, there was still some snow on some of those areas. So I couldn't tell positive how, you know, really rough or good it was. But most of them, you know, I could check pretty well. But I think Tony did a good job as usual that he does. But I'm really glad to hear the Brook Point that we are doing that one of the councilmen did say, you got to go over there. It is really rough. It's bad. And I did check that out. And I'm very glad that we were able to, you know, do that with the substitute and everything. And I did notice it seemed like we have certain areas, like one year, my ward 3, really, we did a heck of a lot. Okay, we haven't done as much in 3 this year, but it seems 6 really seems very popular this year, I think, for some reason that there's a heck of a lot of them on 6 and quite a few on the east side. And we all know I grew up on the east side, so I knew all those roads real well. But great job, Tony. And hey, let's get them paved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Ayula. Anyone else on the committee?
Yes, Mrs. Rhodes, I would just like to say, I want to recognize Mr. Damasi for his smart, progressive approach to street repair. It's a little hard for me to talk about, engineering. It's not my expertise, but I can tell from this composite material, walking the streets like I think many of us have, that it's good stuff. And I've seen it on the street, and it's and you're just listening to you talk about looking for ways to make it better. And I don't need to tell anybody here, especially the other council members, that's the biggest concern I think it is for my ward is the streets. And I think for a town in Northeast Ohio that gets the weather we do, I think we're ahead of the curve. So I just wanted to congratulate you, and I also want to recognize the commitment by the administration for the dollars that are being committed in the budget. I think that's wonderful. I just wanted to say that, and it's not that you won't be hearing from me anymore, Mr. Damasi, you will, but I just want you to know, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a great staff that helps me rate the streets, and we have a great interdepartmental communications and relationships with the street department and other departments. So it's truly a team effort. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else on council have any comments or questions? All right. Anyone on the call, or were there any, Ms. Capriola and Ms. Ciatola, were there any public comments rendered?
No.
Okay, thank you. I agree, Mr. Stamps, it's really impressive. And this is generally what people complain about, probably the most common thing that we hear. And so it's really good. I mean, the administration obviously hears that, and so it's a good thing. So, all right, then I would like to entertain a motion to bring out temporary substitute ordinance B5 out of committee for a vote next week.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0. And that concludes the Public and Industrial Improvements Committee for this evening.
Good evening. It is 7:54, and I will call the Public Affairs Committee to order. Our first matter of business is to approve the minutes from December 7th, 2020. Are there any comments or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, they'll stand approved as written. We have one piece of legislation to discuss this evening, temporary ordinance B6 presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into the Summit County Service Department Response Network Mutual Aid Agreement with various political subdivisions within Summit County and declaring an emergency. And I believe Director Ciatola, you're going to start us off this evening.
Thank you, Chairman Balthus. Over the past several weeks, the County Executive's Office, along with the County Engineer and several municipalities in Summit County, have been discussing the potential impact of COVID-19 on public service operations within the county. In particular, communities have been concerned with addressing snow plowing capabilities that a public service department may face by issues brought on by COVID-19. So in an effort to be proactive and collaborative, this group developed the mutual aid agreement before you today. This agreement, much like the police and fire service mutual aid agreements, contemplates this sharing of equipment and or personnel. And to further bolster responsiveness, the Executive's Office had posted for positions for the county to hire a pool of emergency, temporary, part-time snow and ice control specialists who can be called on and assigned to communities as needed, and to assist these communities with snow plowing in the event of staffing shortages. Some highlights from the agreement are the parties will form a committee to plan and coordinate emergency planning and responsive activities. There's no obligation if a community calls another community for assistance. There's no obligation to provide it if the community is unable to due to their own lack of resources at the time. And the community requesting resources shall reimburse the responding community for any personnel, equipment, or supplies that they use. And finally, any community can withdraw at any time. I think this is another great example of communities working together, pulling together their resources to bring better services to the community. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the thorough explanation. And I don't know if everyone noticed, but Director Ciatola did distribute the agreement this evening. So if you have a chance, feel free to take a look at that. My initial reaction was the similarities I see with police and fire mutual aid agreements, and I think that that's something we're very used to. But police and fire can't respond if the roads are impassable. So I think it's great that we're also looking at coordinating, service resources. And again, I think at any time being able to do more with less is critical. And you think about worst case scenarios, which is a government, we need to think about that. If we had a street department go down with a lot of cases of COVID-19, it's nice that we're already worried about those things and putting in, procedures to help make sure that we can respond. So I appreciate all the work that I know you and everyone else in the administration did to put this together, and the county and the other municipalities. So thank you. At this time, I will entertain any questions from the Public Affairs Committee or comments. Hearing none, I will ask, are there any comments from council or the rail? Are there any comments from public, or did we receive any comments either via mail or email?
No.
All right. Well, hearing no comments, I'll entertain a motion to bring out temporary ordinance B6 with a favorable recommendation for a vote next week.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. The item passes 3-0. And if there's nothing else to come before the Public Affairs Committee, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, it is now 7:59 and the Community Development Committee will come to order. Let's see here, we do have some minutes to approve. They are from January 4th of 2021. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to these minutes? Seeing none, they'll stand approved. We have one piece of legislation to consider. It is B7, presented by the administration. An ordinance implementing sections 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code establishing and describing the boundaries of the Portage Trail Midtown Community Reinvestment Area in the city of Cuyahoga Falls and declaring an emergency. I believe Ms. Calavecchio will be speaking on this behalf. So
Thank
all
you.
yours.
Thank you. Before I begin, let me just refresh your memories on what a CRA is. This ordinance is asking you to allow us to create a whole new CRA district. Let's talk a little bit about what a CRA is. A CRA stands for Community Reinvestment Area. And this is an economic development tool that we have in our arsenal to incentivize development here in the city. We use this tool to assist business owners and homeowners in some cases by offering them tax abatement, and we call that tax exemption, on improvements to their existing structures and or for new construction as well. And the process is actually pretty simple. So let's say that a business wants to spend over $250,000 to put on an addition to their building. Well, they would come to us and we would inquire and ask them to confirm how much the investment is, how many new jobs they're going to create. Obviously, they're worried that adding that much value to their existing structure is going to increase the appraised value, and their real estate taxes are going to go up. And we can assist with that by offering them a CRA tax abatement. So for example, if somebody has a $200,000 building, the taxes on that building are never going to go away. They're always still going to owe whatever that tax is on that building. But once they add the improvements of $250,000, now that building's worth $450,000. So the difference is that those new taxes would be reduced by tax abatement. And we have to have a written agreement that puts that into place. So because they're benefiting from this tax abatement, it makes their investment go a lot farther, and they may build something bigger. They may hire more people. And with all of that new investment, that translates into new revenue for our city, along with more people working here. And then when the abatement period is over, that translates into even more revenue for our city. Well, the ordinance that is before you is long overdue because we currently have several CRA districts in our city. I sent you a map of those, but we've never really had one here on this entire stretch of Portage Trail. In the map I sent you, you saw we have one for the Cuyahoga River area that was established in 2004. We have one in the northern area of our city that was established in 2006 and modified in 2007. And we established one along State Road in 2012. Now, there are parts of Portage Trail that do have a CRA that fall within one of these other CRA districts. Specifically, there are some parcels real close to Portage crossings that are already in a CRA district. And then there's some parcels as you get up to Portage Trail right around 4th Street, from 4th all the way through to 2nd Street. Those are in the district. But there's almost nearly a mile stretch of Portage Trail that does not have a CRA over that. So sometimes we look at Portage Trail and we talk to people about investment there, and they're not real interested in investing there because they almost would rather go to a place where there is a CRA because their investment will go a lot further. I'll remind you that in my research of traffic on the AMAT's website, over 15,000 cars travel on Portage Trail every day. And that number grows to 21,000 as you travel east on your approach to our downtown area. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Fred, and he'll show you the research he did on the housing survey component that is attached to this ordinance. You'll see some of the homes on this road, I think there are about 19 of them, are pretty old. Some are 90 years old. And again, we struggle with asking people to invest here because even in addition to not being able to offer a CRA abatement, Portage Trail is starting to look rather run down. And so this tool will help us to attract investment there and revitalize this stretch of road, which we have come to refer to as the spine in our city, in that it connects our downtown commercial space with the Portage Crossings corridor of our city. The terms of the tax abatement are outlined in the table on page 2 of the ordinance. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at those. And as far as the process goes, we were required to submit a copy of this ordinance to the Cuyahoga Falls School District, and they had a review session with their board a couple evenings ago. I saw that Dr. Nichols was on the Zoom. I had invited him, but he had to leave. I've sent him an email and asked him that if he wanted to email back to me his comments, I will get those out to you. I would distribute those to you between now and next Monday when you would be voting on this. But suffice it to say, we have complied with our duty to notify the school board. And then the other thing is, assuming this passes next week, we then also have to publish this in the local newspaper for 2 weeks in a row. And then the whole thing goes down to the state for final approval and certification. And we've been told that takes about 3 weeks. In the meantime, I will tell you, there are businesses waiting, been patiently waiting for a while for us to get this accomplished on Portage Trail. People have been wanting to improve their existing structures there. And we thank them. We thank them for being so patient with us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Fred, and he can talk a little bit about the research he did. As you can see, there was a lot that went into putting together the housing survey. And if any questions come up or other people are here on the call who want to make comments, we'd be happy to hear from them.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. I'll share my screen again. It'd be easier to describe what we're talking about when you can look at my screen. Again, what Diana said, this is the last section, the last section of between community, the Cuyahoga Falls Community Reinvestment Area and the Northern District. And so it's a stretch of area that is probably maybe in the worst condition of Portage Trail because it's the oldest one. Mm-hmm. And what you really see is a tale of two cities. Is one, you have offices and retail that are in fair to great shape. Some new development like Drug Mart just expanded and improved and other things, and Dairy Queen. But you have a lot of older houses that are just hanging around. Not a lot of investment has been put in them in the last 40, 50 years, enough to keep them in fair condition. And so when you look at this area, there's about 100 parcels. And what's interesting is only 19 of them are residential, commercial make up 17, office 22. And the telling thing is parking, there's 33 parcels that are categorized as parking. And what that means is there are a lot of houses that were torn down to make room, parking spaces for offices and commercial space. So you see these parking lots still there. But the average age of the houses are 90 years. You know, so they run from the 20s, and the newest one is 54 or 52. And when we looked at those houses, as part of the requirement is to do this housing survey. And so we did it both in person, and we used our Ptolemy building blocks to do a database on them. And so when you look at the houses, again, they're not in terrible condition, but they're in need of improvements, in need of total reinvestment. And maybe, since this is even a mixed use district, maybe they could be changed into mixed use structures, offices, which some of them already are, with residential, or converted back to residential. And as you look at these, you know, it's pretty typical: original windows, older roofs, peeling paint. You know, you have structural steps issues, front doors, and so there wasn't anything that was demolition material or things that needed to be torn down. There was just a lot of general disrepair that we found. You know, then we did a public, after looking at those structures, we looked at over the last 5 years, what are some of the records we have? And so when we looked at that, we looked at the highest number of cases we have were code enforcement and utility shutoff cases. Building permits and zoning permits were only 101 activities, and then there's some engineering things that were done in the right of way. So when you look at this table, you see that not a lot of new developments, not a lot of, when we look at a zoning permit, if someone is doing some major work to a structure, and so there wasn't really a lot done. When we looked at building permits and some zoning certificates of little things like new air conditioning, electrical, there were more of those, but they weren't, again, the improvements were not big improvements. They were, Band-Aid improvements to a lot of the structures. And so, when we looked at this, we think that this will be an incentive to do a couple things, is to improve these existing structures and also to encourage, as Diana said, some new development there, and also allow for some redevelopment of some existing office or improvements to office and commercial space. If you have any questions, I will attempt to answer the questions about the survey or in the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone from the committee have any questions? I don't see any. Does anyone on the rail have any questions or anything? Looks like we're just down to one page, so don't have to do any flipping. Ms. Nichols-Rhodes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some questions early on that have been answered. What I really like about this actually is that the homes are included. As we know, it can be very difficult, especially a big old home, to do renovation. So if people could use this to improve their property, I think it's wonderful. And that's all I have, except that I did see Marcy Konas on the line, and I hope you'll speak, because Marcy's been a person who has really invested her life on Portage Trail there for MC Hare, and we really appreciate that you've invested in Cuyahoga Falls. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it.
Any more comments or questions from council? Mr. Gorbach?
Thank you. My first comment is on page 2, the top of the table. There's just an extra 0 put in that minimum investment for the residential remodeling for the 75%.
I see that. Mm-hmm.
So we just probably need to fix that. But I agree. I mean, it is kind of surprising that we haven't had a CRA here or some type of incentive investment program, and I'm glad that we're stepping up to do it. I'm also glad to hear Ms. Colavecchio state that there's several people and or businesses waiting in the wings to put some dollars into their business and or homes on this stretch of Portage Trail and surrounding it. So I look forward to seeing some good things, and hopefully the state won't take any longer than 3 weeks, and we can get this published and moving, and it'll be a good time. Hopefully the weather will start breaking. Hopefully I didn't just jinx everything by saying that, and we can see some improvement. Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Brillhart?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment. I just think this is absolutely wonderful, and a great thank you to the administration and Mrs. Kolavec for doing this. It's just very thorough and very well thought out. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council or any Mrs. Nichols-Rhodes?
I'm sorry, I know this is just very preliminary, but the comment that was made that about working with AMATs to widen Portage Trail, in my view, it would be just like up at Portage Crossings, that we would like some traffic calming, not more traffic, or at least for it to be reasonable, going at a reasonable speed. So if there were parking on Portage, I could see a widening to allow for that, but that's just a very preliminary comment I wanted to throw out there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Last call, any questions or comments from council or departments or administration? Any questions or comments from members of the public? No, hearing none. Okay. I think the information that was provided is very detailed. I was speaking to Diana earlier today, and it's just all of this information. I'm looking forward to it because some of those houses and business facades, just like with State Road, need attention. And I love this item. And if there are no other questions or comments, I'd like to bring out B7 with a favorable motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Yes, that's 3-0. We will bring out B7 for a vote on Monday, February 8th of 2021. And that concludes community development. Does anyone else have anything? No? Okay, then we'll see everyone on next Monday.
Have a good night.